What's going on, guys? It's New York Prepper here. In this video, I want to talk to you guys about breaking in your rifle barrel. And this video is just going to be a voiceover. What you're looking at is just a picture of my precision rifle that I just got back from GA Precision, which is one of the most well-known precision rifle gunsmiths. And it's a 300 Win Mag with a Krieger barrel, a Bell & Carlson stock, and a Burris XTR2 scope. And that's the rifle that I specifically built with SHTF and WROL in mind. If you want to check out more information on precision rifles, check out my long range shooting playlist, and I also have a playlist on my SHTF precision rifle build, which I go over all the specific features of the rifle that you see here in this picture, and I discuss how you can select a cartridge and a firearm for SHTF if you want to build a precision rifle for SHTF. And I go over the pros and cons of a lot of the common calibers and cartridges. So check that out, the SHTF Precision Rifle Build playlist, and also my long range shooting playlist, which I plan to build up more content in those playlists over the next few months as I go to the long range shooting range near my house. There's a 1,000-yard range, and I'm going to have some content for you guys for me at the long range shooting at 1,000 yards. So without further delay, I want to talk about breaking in a rifle barrel, and I'm just going to do a quick overview of why you want to break in your rifle barrel and what it actually means and how you're going to do that. So it's actually, a lot of people get intimidated by gunsmithing and a lot of stuff related to gunsmithing, but gunsmithing is actually pretty simple. Once you sit down and think about it logically, it's really nothing to be scared of. And breaking in a rifle barrel is really easy to do, and it's something that you should definitely do if you have a new rifle that you just picked up from the store, or if you have a custom build like me. You definitely want to break it in, especially if you have a match grade barrel. Like my barrel is made by Krieger, and Krieger makes precision rifle barrels that are match grade. And I'll go over some of the details of how barrels are actually made. I'm going to explain it to you in simple terms, and then I'm going to get into why you want to break in your rifle barrel. All right. And it's similar to like a baseball glove. When you buy a baseball glove, it's very stiff and uncomfortable, and it's hard to catch a ball with it, because the leather's too stiff. So you break the glove in by using it, by playing catch with it, by putting oil on it, and eventually it gets really soft and it's much easier to use. And it's kind of similar with a rifle. Rifles get more accurate as you shoot them more, believe it or not. And the reason why that is because a rifle barrel, inside of the barrel, there's little burrs and imperfections in the barrel from when the barrel is manufactured. So manufacturing a barrel is not imperfect. Manufacturing a barrel is imperfect. It's not perfect. Even with the best technology that we have with $50,000 CNC machines and all kinds of lathes and very expensive machines, it's still not a perfect thing. Machining in and of itself is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So when you break in a rifle barrel, what you're doing is you're smoothing out the barrel and removing those imperfections, so you're getting the maximum accuracy out of your barrel, and also to help with cleaning the barrel and to make it easier to remove copper deposits and fouling. So basically, the way rifle barrels are made typically in today's world is there's three types of barrels. You have cold forged or cold hammer forged. That's the same thing. You have forged barrels, button rifled barrels, and cut rifled barrels. All right. Hammer forged barrel or forged or cold forged, it's all the same thing. What it is basically a forging machine forges or presses a piece of hot metal, which becomes the barrel. All right, you have a machine, you have a press, and it presses the barrel, the rifling into the barrel, basically. All right, so they heat up the barrel material, and then they put it into a machine that presses the rifling into the barrel while it's hot, and that leaves an imprint of the rifling. All right. Barrels that are forged tend to be the least accurate of the three types of barrels between button, cut rifling, and forged. The forged is the least accurate of the three. And the reason why is forging, you can't get to the same tolerances as you can with cut rifling and button rifling, because you're forging, you're pressing it, and the tolerances are just not as good as if you're cutting a barrel, with a machine. You can get much tighter tolerances. Not to say that forged barrels are not accurate, but they're not going to have the same accuracy potential as a cut rifled barrel or a button rifled barrel. They can still be very accurate. In fact, I have a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan in 300 Win Mag, and I was shooting 1.5-inch groups with it at 300 yards with some cheap Serbian ammo that I bought for like, $20 a box. And those are forged barrels. Rugers are all forged barrels. So it's not to say that a forged barrel can't be accurate, but it just doesn't have that potential. Now we move on to button rifled barrels, which are a step up in accuracy from the forged barrels. And a button rifled barrel is literally there's a machine that takes a button, which is like, imagine like a bit. It's like almost like a drill bit. And the machine basically forces that bit or the button through the barrel and twists it under extreme, hydraulic pressure. It basically displaces the metal from the inside of the barrel, all right, from the bore. It's literally like a drill bit or a button, and the machine pushes through the bore, all right, so the bore is already drilled out in the barrel, and then to imprint the rifling, the button is forced through the bore, and that removes the material inside, and that's what creates the rifling. Now, the button rifling method is better than forging. You can get tighter tolerances. It's more accurate, but it also puts stress on the barrel because you're literally forcing this button through the barrel under immense pressure. And some people think that it's not as reliable long term. It puts pressure on the barrel. So a lot of people don't like button rifling. Button rifling is a step up from forging, but it's not as good as cut rifling. And cut rifling is the most accurate and probably the best method for accuracy. As far as if you want a rifle barrel that's going to give you a lot of accuracy, you want to have a cut rifled barrel. Every match grade rifle barrel, like a Krieger, Bartlein, Brooks, some of those other ones, Hart, those big custom barrel manufacturers, most of them use cut rifling. Okay. And the reason why cut rifling is better is what happens is with cut rifling that's different than button and forging is there's literally a bit, but what the bit does is rather than displacing the metal under extreme pressure like the button does, it cuts out the rifling. All right, that's why it's called cut rifling. And it doesn't cut a lot of material out. It only cuts out like 1/1000 of an inch, so very tiny amount. this machine removes a very little amount of metal. All right, and it makes probably hundreds of passes back and forth inside the barrel until it finally cuts the rifling out. Okay, the cut rifling method is considered the most accurate because you can really get those tight tolerances because you're cutting out material very small amounts at a time. It doesn't put pressure on the barrel like button rifling does, and you can get those tight tolerances. So it's really the best of all the three methods. However, for mass producing, forging and button rifling is the most common. So if you have a factory rifle or like a semi-custom rifle, like Montana Rifle Company, when they were still in business, they would use button rifling. Because button rifling, you can mass produce more barrels. It's a lot faster process. You can, with a forging process, for example, you can forge out a bunch of barrels very quickly. Same thing with a button rifle barrel. You can, push out a lot of barrels in one day. Versus cut rifling, it can take days just to cut one barrel because they have to make so many passes to cut the rifling out. So that's why cut rifling is the best, because it removes a little bit of metal with each pass. It doesn't put pressure, and it's a longer process. That's why match grade barrels and precision rifle barrels tend to be more expensive, and they take a longer time to make. It takes a few days or even a few weeks to produce one barrel because they have to make many passes. And then once they cut the rifling out, they have to do what's called hand lapping. And hand lapping is they take an abrasive compound. Once they've cut the rifling down to the best level that they can, using the tightest tolerances possible, and they get the rifling to where they want it, then they do hand lapping. And they do that with button rifling and with cut rifling typically. They don't usually do that with forging. You can hand lap a forged barrel, but it's just not necessary, and I'll get into why that is in a second. But hand lapping is they take an abrasive compound after the cut rifling is done, or with button rifling, after they've pushed the rifling out, they've displaced the metal, and they take this abrasive compound and they rub it through the inside of the bore, and what that does is just remove some of the imperfections that were left over during the machining process that are still inside the barrel. So let's say, for example, with cut rifling, they're using a machine to cut the rifling out of the bore, and when they do that, there may be a little bit of a burr, or there may be some pieces of metal on the outside, on the sides of the rifling, where the tool went through and it cut the metal, it displaced the metal, and there may be some leftover imperfections on the rifling. There may be some jagged edges, some burrs, things like that. And so the hand lapping smooths out that rifling and produces a finished product. Okay, it's just like, imagine if you're doing a wood carving and you're carving out some kind of statue from wood. Once you've done all the carving, you're going to take some sandpaper and smooth it out, so it looks a little more polished. And that's all hand lapping is. They're just polishing the barrel after the machining process. Same thing with button rifling. When they're pushing that button through under high pressure, it's going to leave a jagged edge. It's going to leave some burrs and some imperfections. So the hand lapping just smooths everything out. And so, going into breaking in a barrel, is similar to hand lapping. Okay, what you're doing when you break in a barrel is you're basically removing any leftover imperfections that are inside the barrel, any jagged edges, burrs, any kind of weird metal that shouldn't be where it is, left over after the machining process that, the hand lapping didn't take care of. A lot of manufacturers and even custom barrel makers like Krieger and Bartlein, they're not going to take a bore scope and look through the barrel when they're done lapping a barrel. They usually just run it through their machine. then they have the guy lap it, and he counts how many strokes he does. And once he's done enough strokes, that's usually it. They rinse it off, and then they pack it up and ship it. They don't inspect it meticulously, with a bore scope to see that they removed every single burr and every single jagged edge left over from the cut rifling process or the button rifling process. So that's where breaking in a barrel is essential, because what you're doing when you break in a barrel is you're removing those burrs, and when you do that, the bullet is going to have better contact with the rifling. It's going to engage the rifling better, and it's going to make that bullet twist better, which is going to make it more stable. It's going to give it, and if it's more stable and it has better contact with the rifling, then you're going to have tighter groups and more accuracy, okay? And that's what we want when we're talking about rifles. Now, if we're talking about, AR-15s or rifles that are made for short range, like dangerous game rifles, if you're shooting under 100 yards or 50 yards, having a super accurate rifle is not that critical. As long as you're shooting, 1-inch groups, that's fine. But if we're talking about long-range shooting beyond 300 yards and out to a mile, you want to squeeze out the utmost accuracy out of your rifle. And doing little things on your precision rifle will squeeze out the maximum accuracy from that rifle that you have. And you'll often hear of people betting their actions or blueprinting or truing the bolt lugs. All these little things that you do to your precision rifle will add up and make your rifle more accurate. So, glass bedding or having a bedding job done, blueprinting your action and truing up the bolt lugs and truing up the barrel threading so it has good contact with the receiver tenon. All these little things that you do, breaking in the barrel, free floating, having a very rigid stock, all these things add up and they make your rifle more accurate, so you can go from, let's say, a 1 MOA rifle before all those things down to maybe a sub half MOA or quarter MOA rifle, and so breaking in the barrel is essential. And it's not that hard to do, and like I said, it smooths out the inside of the barrel. Whatever lapping that the company did or your barrel maker did, breaking in the barrel will finalize that process and remove any leftover jagged edges, all right? And you break in the barrel just by shooting it and cleaning it and doing it a lot, and that breaks in the barrel. If you were to just shoot your rifle without actually doing a breaking in procedure, your rifle would actually start to get more accurate as you go to the range with it more and more. Because every time you shoot your rifle, the bullet, it's going to wear down any jagged edges or burrs or metal that's not supposed to be where it is. It's going to remove that metal because the bullet is going extremely fast and it's under a lot of pressure and temperature, and that's going to remove any burrs or any weird metal that shouldn't be where it is. And every time you go to the range, you're breaking the barrel in. The problem is when you shoot the rifle after the first 2 or 3 shots, it's really the first shot on a cold, clean rifle is when you're really removing most of the imperfections. And then after that, what happens is you have fouling inside the barrel, all right? You have pieces of copper, pieces of lead. Usually it's typically copper, all right, because copper is what the jacket is made of, and the copper is what has contact with the bore, with the rifling, all right? So what's going to happen is you're going to displace the leftover metal that the manufacturer didn't remove the imperfections when you shoot your rifle. All right, but after that first shot or maybe 2-3 shots, what happens is the copper starts to foul up the barrel, and when it does that, it prevents you from further removing any more imperfections. All right, because the copper fills in those gaps and those imperfections, and basically protects them from being removed. So what you have to do is you have to shoot and then clean, and then shoot and then clean, and then shoot and then clean. And you got to do that, you know, some guys do it up to 50 rounds, okay? And you really have to follow the break-in procedure from your barrel manufacturer. Every barrel manufacturer has a different barrel break-in procedure, but typically what you're doing is you're shooting on a cold bore, and that's going to remove any imperfections. Then you're removing the copper after that first shot, and once you remove the copper by cleaning, you have a fresh barrel again. You take another shot, and that second shot will remove more of the imperfections. Then you clean again, and you just keep repeating like that until you smooth out the inside of the barrel and you remove all the imperfections and everything is nice and smooth. And by doing that, you're going to have a more accurate barrel, and it's also going to be easier to clean, because what's going to happen is you're going to smooth out any imperfections. And when you smooth out the inside of the barrel and you smooth out the imperfections, it's going to make copper and lead and, you know, powder residue, it makes it harder for those things to deposit inside the bore, because the surface of the metal is smoother and there's less imperfections, so it's going to be easier for you to clean. And as a result, you know, so it's better overall. You would be stupid not to break in your barrel. Now, the good news is if you have a hammer forged barrel or cold forged barrel, like most AR-15s, most commercial bolt action rifles, especially Ruger's rifles are all hammer forged. I believe CZs are all hammer forged as well. Winchesters may also be forged. A lot of mass-produced rifles are hammer forged. Some of the semi-custom rifle shops, like my Montana Rifle Company, some of the smaller companies like that, they'll do button rifling. And then you can go the full custom route, and that's where you'll find your cut rifled barrels. All right, hammer forged barrels are also much more reliable, you know, because they are stamped, you know, with the presses. So the rifling is much more. The tolerances aren't as good, but the rifling is more solid, I guess you can say. So forged barrels are, although they're not as accurate, they're more resilient to not cleaning and not maintaining and abrasions and things like that. So going back to hammer forging, if you guys remember the process, they take a hot piece of metal and they forge it. You know, they have a giant hydraulic machine that stamps the rifling and presses the rifling into that hot piece of metal, and that's how you get your rifled bore. And so, using common sense, a forged barrel is not going to have jagged edges and burrs and leftover material from, you know, cutting or displacing metal like the button rifling and cut rifling processes are. So a hammer forged barrel, you're not going to need to break it in. You can still break it in if you like. It's no harm in doing that. You may still get some benefit from it, but the benefit is not going to be as great on a forged barrel as it is on a button and a cut rifled barrel. All right, a cut rifled barrel, it's almost mandatory to break in your barrel. If you don't break in your barrel on a cut rifled barrel, then you're foolish, because you spent all that money to get a custom barrel and you're not getting the maximum accuracy out of it because you're too lazy to break it in. You know, if you spent hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars on a custom rifle that you want to use for 1,000 yards, you got to break it in, you know, to get the best potential out of it. So, but a hammer forged barrel, you don't have to break it in, you know, because of that stamping process with the forging. You know, there's not really any jagged edges or anything like that. There may still be some imperfections, and breaking it in will help. But you're not going to get as much benefit as a button rifled or cut rifled barrel will get a huge benefit from breaking in. So my recommendations on breaking in and quickly going back to forged barrels. I don't want to cast forged barrels in a negative light. When I'm comparing forged barrels to cut rifled barrels, it doesn't mean a forged barrel is junk and it's not accurate. All right, it just means that it's less accurate than a cut rifled barrel because the cut rifling will get better tolerances. But forged barrels are still very accurate. Like I told you guys, on my rifle, I shot 1.5-inch groups at 300 yards with some cheap Serbian ammo out of my Ruger 300 Win Mag. So it's not that they're not accurate, but they are more reliable, and that's the reason why a lot of in World War II, the M1 Garand was actually a forged barrel. Number one, because they had to mass produce, millions of the rifles for the troops. But number two, the forged barrels could take a beating, in battlefield conditions. When you need a rifle that's going to be abused, like AR-15s or battle rifles that see a lot of use and a lot of volume of shooting and aren't necessarily maintained as well and aren't babied as much, that's when you want a forged barrel, all right, because it's less accurate, but there's more forgiveness in terms of if you don't maintain it as well, it's going to have better longevity, it's going to be more resilient to rust and debris and abrasions and things like that. So forged barrels are the most reliable of the three. They're least sensitive to poor maintenance versus cut rifled barrels because they are such a high quality product, and they're cut so to such tight tolerances. They're the most finicky when it comes to different types of bullets you're using and maintenance and cleaning and breaking in. That's when you really have to pay attention to details, is with a cut rifled barrel. And that's why cut rifling lends itself best to precision rifles and long range rifles than AR-15s and things like that. So with the break-in procedure, typically the general rule of thumb is what you do is you get some copper solvent and you get yourself just a regular cleaning brush, not a cleaning brush, a cleaning rod, and some patches and some copper solvent. You don't need a brush. In fact, you don't want to use a brush because a brush is going to give you false readings in terms of how much copper is still in the barrel. So because brushes are made from copper, so when you use copper solvent, it's going to dissolve the brush, and it's going to, when you're cleaning the barrel, you're going to think that, oh man, there's still copper inside the barrel. But there's really no copper fouling in the barrel. It's just the copper solvent eating away the brush, and that's leaving on your patches, it's leaving that bluish color of copper residue. So you don't want to use a brush. You're literally just using a patch and a cleaning rod, and you're putting a little bit of solvent on your patch. You're running it through, you're coating the barrel inside with it, and then you're taking a dry patch and you're wiping it out, all right? And you're removing the fouling, and you do that between every shot for the first 5 to 10 shots. So you shoot once, then you clean, all right? You're cleaning the copper out, and you after you shoot once, when you clean, you want to remove all the copper, okay? So you get down to fresh metal. So that way when you shoot the next round, you're removing more imperfections, okay? So that's why you don't want to use a brush. You just want to use a regular patch. You can use a nylon brush if you like, all right? But even just a patch is good enough. The solvents, copper solvents, are very strong, and you don't really need any kind of scrubbing, especially after one shot. It's not going to be like a heavy coat of copper fouling. So even just a regular patch will do. You take your shot, you clean the copper out, you keep running patches through until the patches come out totally clean. And when copper breaks down, it turns into a blue color. So when your patches come out blue, you know that you're removing copper. And once the patches come out white, you know that the copper is gone. and then you can shoot your next round and then repeat the process again. So you keep doing that. You shoot once, clean once, get all the copper out, shoot again, and you keep repeating over and over, and you do that typically 5 to 10 rounds, the first 5 to 10 rounds, okay? Well, actually, before you do that, if your rifle is brand new, you want to clean the barrel out, all right? You always want to clean your rifles when they come back from the shop or from the factory. If you have a brand new rifle and you're shooting it the first time, you want to disassemble your rifle, clean it from head to toe, especially the bore, because you don't know what kind of residue is in the barrel. You don't know what kind of grease they used, and that could affect your accuracy. It could even damage your barrel on the inside. The bore could get damaged if there's some leftover pieces of metal from machining or from any kind of work that they did on it. So you want to thoroughly clean your rifle before you shoot it the first time. Then you start your break-in procedure, and like I said, you do the first shot, then clean, then another shot, and you alternate like that. And you obviously want to let the barrel cool before you take your next shot. So you shoot, clean, let the barrel cool, and then shoot again, clean, let the barrel cool, shoot again, clean, let the barrel cool, and you do that, and it takes a while. So you got to be ready to spend at least, I would say 2 to 3 hours at the range doing that. And in the process, you can sight in your rifle as well. If it's a new rifle, you can use that time to sight in the rifle, so you're not just shooting, random, wasting ammo. So you sight it in and break in at the same time. So you do that for the first 5 to 10 rounds. You do one shot, then clean, then one shot, then clean. Then after you get 5 to 10 rounds, you can go to like 3 to 5 shot groups and clean between every 3 or 5 shot group. And then you want to do that until you reach a total of 50 rounds shot. Okay, so let's say you do 10 rounds, shooting and cleaning in between each round. Then you do the next, then you start going to 5 shot groups and then cleaning between every 5 shot group. So then you're going to do that, I don't know what my math, you're going to do that 8 times. So then you're going to shoot 8 5-shot groups and clean between each 5-shot group. So you're going to do 8 5-shot groups and clean between each one, and that'll get you a total count of 50. That's the general rule of thumb. You can modify that however you like. I personally like to do one-shot groups and cleaning between one shot for the first 10 shots. Then I'll go to 3-shot groups, and then I'll go to 5-shot groups. That's how I like to do it. And so if you didn't do this break-in procedure, your rifle would eventually break itself in. But the thing is like I said, after those first 1 or 2 shots, you're coating that barrel with fresh copper, and that copper is going to prevent you from removing any imperfections when you shoot. So you would have to go to the range and, providing that you're, let's say, cleaning after every time you go to the range. Let's say you do the 50 round method for breaking in, like I mentioned. You're going to be cleaning at least, let's say you do the 10 single shot groups and then you do the 8-5. You're cleaning 18 times, So that's the equivalent of going to the range 18 times, That's the same thing, all right? So your rifle will eventually break itself in if you don't do the break-in procedure. It's just going to take a lot longer. And why do that to yourself? If you can break it in one day and speed up the process rather than waiting 10 years until you've gone to the range, 50 times. Let's say the average person goes to the range once a year. So, you could have that gun for 10 or 20 years and still not have the same effect on the imperfections in the bore as you do, breaking in one afternoon, So that's why people break in their barrels. So, that's pretty much it. If you do have a custom barrel, you always want to check your manufacturer and see what they say about breaking in. If you don't have a custom rifle but you want to break it in anyway, I would recommend doing single shot groups like I mentioned for the first 10 shots. So shoot clean, shoot clean, shoot clean. Do that 10 times. Then move on to 3-shot groups. So do 3 shots, then clean, 3 shots, then clean, 3 shots, then clean. And you can do that for, let's say, 10 times. And then you can do 2 5-shot groups. And then that'll hit that total of 50 shots. All right? Or 50 rounds through the barrel. That's one way to do it. You can go online and check the National Shooting Sports Foundation. I'm sure they have something about, basic barrel break-in procedures. You can check the U.S. military sniper manual. They have a lot of information on precision rifles. They may have something about breaking in. But that's typically how I do it, and I've had success with doing it with that method. Now, if you are using copper solvents in your bore, you have to remember as soon as you put that solvent in your bore, you have to clean it right away. You don't want to let it sit there like a Hops number 9 or standard lead, powder residue solvent. Copper solvent will eat away at the steel in your bore and destroy the accuracy. It can also eat away at the steel in other parts of the rifle. So you want to, be very careful when you're working with copper solvent. Especially if you get some copper solvent and it drips into the rifle receiver or into the action, it gets on your bolt, into your trigger assembly, your scope rings, it can eat away at the metal in those areas. So you want to be very careful when you're working with copper solvent. You don't want to use too much, just put a few drops on that patch. You don't have to douse the whole patch with copper solvent so it's dripping all over the place. You just need a little bit to coat the barrel and remove the copper, and be very careful. After you're done with the break-in procedure, you want to give your rifle a full thorough cleaning. This way if there's any copper solvent that got left over and it got stuck inside of the receiver somewhere, it dripped down into the magazine or something like that. This way you get that all out of there so it doesn't just sit in there, and you put it in your safe, and then 6 months from now you see that there's this whole part of your rifle that got corroded away because of the copper solvent got stuck in there. So copper solvent is an abrasive. It will eat away at metal. Think of it as acid, basically. It's like an acid, and it's very harmful to metal as well. So you have to work quickly with it. As soon as you put it in the bore, you got to wipe it right away. Don't let it sit for minutes. If you're at the range and some guy's very talkative to you, tell them, hold on, I'm not trying to be rude, but let me finish what I'm doing here. I'm working with copper solvent, and I don't want to destroy my $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 rifle over a 10-minute conversation, because that's all it takes. If you have copper solvent and it's stuck in the bore, and some guy at the range is talking to you and he's admiring your rifle and he's asking you questions about it, and you're sitting there chit-chatting, and meanwhile you forgot to wipe the solvent out, and you go to shoot your next group, and your group is totally terrible. It shoots worse than a Mossberg, I don't know, what do they call them, American, the Ruger American rifle, or a Mossberg Patriot shoots worse than a Mossberg Patriot, a $300 bolt action. Your $2,000 custom rifle is going to now shoot worse than a Mossberg Patriot. You got to really pay attention to what you're doing. It's working with any kind of solvent, especially copper solvent. It's very abrasive. So clean that barrel out, remove the solvent as quickly as possible. Don't let it sit in there. Don't go to use the bathroom and come back 10 minutes later. As soon as you put it in there, wipe it out, get it out, let it cool down, let the barrel cool down, and then shoot again and repeat the process. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you enjoyed it, if you learned something new. Let me know if it was too long. So thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 P's. Prepare, practice, and persevere.